It's that time again, so get your Bibles and gather your family because it's time to begin Fabric of Family.
How do you explain? How do you describe?
In Him, all families are blessed. Join our discussion on Fabric of Family.
I heard the story once about an aged couple who was surprised one day when their older children gave them a reception that was in celebration of their 60th wedding anniversary. As their guests were leaving the reception hall, the wife looks over at her husband and says, "After all of these years, you are still tried and true." Now the man was a little hard hearing, so he said, "What did you say?" She repeated herself and said, "After all of these years, I still find you tried and true." He says, "I can't hear you. What did you say?" By this time, she's frustrated and she tells him a little louder. She says, "After all these years, I still find you tried and true." To which he says, "Yeah, and I'm sick and tired of you too." You know, communication, it is so important. So oftentimes, we as humans who communicate constantly can be so ineffective in relaying and receiving accurate messages. And it has an effect upon our relationship with our spouse and our children too. In our program today, we're going to discuss how we can become better and more effective at communicating within the family unit. But before we begin our discussion, I want to invite you to hear Kyle Butt with another one of his family faith builders. Kyle?
God of our fathers praised, and the God of our fathers praised.
In the year 2007, a man by the name of David Hanson had an organization, a company called Xeno Robotics. And Xeno Robotics decided they were going to build a robot, and that's exactly what they did. Built a robot that they called Xeno. Xeno was top of the line. It was a technological advancement unlike many that anybody had ever seen, as far as Xeno was trying to mimic the characteristics of a real little boy. They had a patented skin on him that Hanson called Frubber. It was so interesting and so flexible and versatile that they got a U.S. patent on it. They said, "This little robot is so much like a human, people are going to love buying this for their children. He can talk, he can interact with other people, he can recognize faces and even call that person by name." Xeno was an advancement that was superior to so many. There was another boy named Xeno at the time as well, and that was Hanson's son. Now, Hanson's son, a little toddler of 18 months old who was getting into everything at the house. In fact, as the people were writing about Xeno, Hanson's son, they said he would just walk unimpaired through all the electronics in the laboratory there where they were building the robotic Xeno. When you look at those two, Xeno the robot, Xeno the little boy, we understand that Xeno the little boy was so far advanced in so many ways than the robot. You see, Xeno the little boy had self-repairing skin that if anybody could mimic it today, not only would they have a U.S. patent, but they would make multiplied billions of dollars. Not only could Xeno the little boy recognize people's faces and names, but he could walk, he could toddle, he could do all kinds of amazing things. Now, if we were to ask the simple question, does Xeno the robot have a designer? Well, the answer is obvious, yes, absolutely, positively. What about this question? Does Xeno the little boy have a designer? Well, what's the answer? The answer to a person who's coming at that question with an honest heart has to be yes. If Xeno the Robot has a designer, and yet he is so inferior in so many ways to Xeno the toddler, then we must conclude, if we're going to be honest and rational, that Xeno the little boy has a designer. And not only just a designer, but you understand that Xeno the Robot was the culmination of 5 years of research, thousands of man-hours, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and yet he didn't even approach the abilities of Xeno the toddler. What's that say about just the little boy? Whoever designed that little boy must have an amazing intellect, a designing capability beyond anything that we have ever seen. And that's what the psalmist said, wasn't it? When he said that, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and that my soul knows right well. Well, we are designed, and we have been fearfully and wonderfully made. And not only is that a biblical truth, but it's a scientific truth. I'm Kyle Butt, and this has been a Family Faith Builder.
We're getting ready to begin our discussion panel with two gentlemen who have joined us today. We have Chris Moran and also Luke Stevenson. Before we get into the topic of principles of effective family communication, I want to give each of you opportunity just to briefly introduce yourself to those who may not know who you are and would like to know a little bit more about you. Chris, we'll start with you.
I'm Chris Moran, and I am the pulpit minister for the Morris Hill Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama. My wife and I are also house parents at the North Alabama Christian Children's Home in the Killen area. I've been the minister there for almost 2 years now, but prior to that I was a youth minister at Jackson Heights for about 5 years, and so it's good to be here.
It's good to have you with us, Chris. Luke, what can you tell us about yourself?
I am the youth minister part-time at Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, and I am delighted to be here.
Luke's good to have you here, and I know you're also working on some studies at college.
Yes.
And also preparing yourself to be a full-time preacher.
Yes.
And so we wish you well in that. We're glad to have both of you here today. We're talking about principles of effective family communication. And this is an important topic, obviously, because communication is something we do on a daily basis, but we don't always do a good job with it, do we? How important would you say that good communication is to our relationships?
Well, Barry, it's not just important, it's essential, I believe.
Okay.
I think, the only way to tell people, to express people the way you're feeling is through good communication. The only way people know, how others are feeling is good communication. And if you don't have good communication, you obviously can bottle things up, and you can keep things inside and become bitter. And that's the last thing that we want to do.
Okay. All right. Excellent thoughts, Chris.
I've always viewed communication as an exchange of information, whether it be something profound as Bible knowledge or something as simple as saying I love you. But if you really think of the complexity of I love you, it's not simple at all. And so if we do not effectively communicate that, especially in maybe a relationship with a husband and wife, that can cause big trouble.
I think we would all like to think that we're great communicators. And perhaps one reason for that is because we know what we mean, we know what we're thinking, and we just assume everyone else does as well. But the truth of the matter is we probably all could make some improvements in this area. I think it would be profitable for us maybe just to think about some indicators that maybe our communication is not as great as we would like for it to be. What are some indications of poor communication within a family unit?
Well, if you could secretly look into the lives of many families, I'm afraid what's happening in our society today with the technological age that we're living in is the families are all in separate rooms. You have the children are in their bedrooms on their iPads or their iPhones or whatever form of communication they have. Maybe dad's in the living room watching TV, mom's on the computer doing something. And I think that's a detriment to the family unit because we've traded the supper table for a quick trip to the fast food restaurant. We've traded a family game night for you go here, I go there, we'll meet back at a certain time and go to sleep. And so maybe just togetherness is gone in the family.
Yeah, and sometimes the togetherness we have may be together focused on something else, like a television set, you know. And
True.
And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing to watch television with your family, but at the same time, when we're focused on it, it's doing the communicating. We're just kind of, you know, in tune with the television rather than those we're sitting around. What are some other indicators that we may see in a family from time to time that suggest that some improvements could be made?
Well, you have to know where your priorities lie. If your priorities lie with your work or your school or that baseball tournament that we're rushing to when we get home, then that's a huge indicator that the communication level isn't as what you would like it to be. I think that if you're too busy to sit down with your family, that's a huge red flag for dinner or for game night or anything like that.
You know, sometimes I think our communication is less effective with our family as opposed to those who are our coworkers. Now, that's just my opinion. But I think sometimes we put more effort into making sure that we have communicated clearly, maybe with someone at work, a supervisor, someone who works under us. But, you know, we're not always as careful. We don't always watch exactly what we say or try to be as exact in our wording sometimes with our family. Why do you think we do that?
Well, two things really comes to mind. Number one is we tend to hurt the ones we love the most. And when we're talking about communication, as you said earlier, we think people know what we're talking about. And when you come to a family, if you're around your family enough, you pick up on different communication styles. And maybe when you're at home, you know they know what you mean. When you're at work, you want to communicate what you're wanting to say in more a clearer manner because you have someone maybe to impress, maybe it's a boss or a supervisor, and you want to make sure that you are communicating your best with them because you don't want to sacrifice or you don't want to jeopardize your job in any way. It's easier to be yourself at home. And
so you think we take for granted our family more so than maybe a job?
I think so. We just assume they're always going to be there and they're always going to support and they're always going to accept. And an employee, we may not think the same about.
I think oftentimes we do have better communication skills with our work associates because, well, to be honest, you're with your work associates more in the day than your family most of the time.
That's a good point.
But the thing is, the work associates may have the quantity, but the family has to win the quality of your style. If you're going home and you're watching TV and you're going to fast food and not having dinner, sitting down to talk with how your school went that day or how your work day went with your family, then there's a problem, and that's a red flag.
Well, what are some other indicators of bad communication within the family? We've listed a couple here, but surely there's some more.
Well, I know we can't judge people and we don't know what happens behind closed doors, but in youth ministry, when you have a teenager that's bitter towards their parents, that could be an indicator that there's not a lot of communication at home. I know I can remember my last spanking or whooping that I received from my father, but to their they always told me why I was in trouble. I never got disciplined without knowing why. And it wasn't until later on in my life that I did realize that it truly hurt my father more than it hurt me. But they always told me why I was in trouble. Some children today, they may get yelled at or in trouble and really not know why.
Parents just react and they don't really communicate. There's not that teaching that should be going on when discipline is necessary. And so that's certainly something that parents have got to be mindful of.
And if I could add here, maybe we react when we should respond.
Oh, excellent.
Maybe that's a great breakdown of communication.
Well, that's a good place to take a break. We'll come back and talk about this a little bit more, but it's time for a family tech tip of the week with Robert Hatfield, and then we're going to watch a Word for the Family, a family devotional by Corey Barnett. So let's watch these segments, and then we'll be back to continue.
Have you heard about hashtags? These are often used on social media websites. A hashtag is a word or a phrase that's preceded by a hash or a pound sign and used to identify messages on a specific topic. You'll find them on sites like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and even on some blogs. Hashtags make handy organizational tools. For example, on a social media website like Facebook, Barry Gilreath might post a video of the most recently recorded episodes of this program. He could hashtag that post Fabric of Family. By the way, notice that there aren't any spaces in a hashtag. Barry's hashtag will then become a link, and all of the posts with that hashtag in it will be shown together by clicking on that link. So after Barry posted the video link, I might post some information about my tech tip of the week and use the same hashtag Fabric of Family. My post would then show up with Barry's post. Now let's say that you enjoyed this program, which we hope you do, and that you want to post on Facebook or Twitter and invite your online friends to watch the program each week on this channel at this time. Well, you could also use the hashtag Fabric of Family and join the conversation between Barry and me. As you can see, hashtags are a great way to track any conversation or string of posts on a social media website. Now, anyone can use them by simply putting the pound or the hash symbol in front of a word or phrase with no spaces, and suddenly you're a part of a global conversation. Well, I'm out of time for this segment, but next week, Lord willing, I want to share with you the meaning behind some popular hashtags. I hope you'll join me then. I'm Robert Hatfield, and this has been yet another Family Tech Tip of the Week.
Hallelujah. Hey, praise God Jehovah. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Hello, my name is Corey Barnett. I am the preacher for the Fairview Church of Christ in Pulaski, Tennessee, and this is another edition of Word for the Family. I would like to take our attention for a few moments to the Gospel account according to John, in particular chapter 15 at verse 13. On this occasion our Lord said these words, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." I take us there as an introduction to what we're going to study for the next few moments. There are times on this earth where sometimes we may feel like no one really cares about us and that we may not think that we are very important to anyone and that the world might even be, some might think, better off if we weren't here. But I want us to know that there is always someone out there who cares for us, and He is one who demonstrated just how much He cares in the way that He lived and, more importantly, in the way that He died. The greatest love that another man can show an individual is to be willing to lay down his life for him. On the battlefield, there are individuals who have experienced that, where a comrade in arms put his life on the line to rescue someone else, and they saw just how devoted that person was to the other. That is what Jesus has done for you and I in showing how much He cares for us. In John chapter 10, I want to read some verses that Jesus again said on the occasion to prepare individuals for His death. He said, "Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father." Over the years, there have been individuals who have gotten upset about who was responsible for the death of Jesus. And there have been individuals who thought that the Jews were responsible. And in some ways, yes, they were. They were used as instruments to bring it about. But at the end of the day, it was Jesus Himself who laid down His life for you and I. And remember, He said that greater love hath no man than this, than that a man laid down his life for his friends. When you feel like you're friendless, you feel like no one cares for you, remember you have a friend who died for you. Not because anyone made him do it, but because He chose to do it. He loves you that much. My name is Corey Barnett, and again, this has been another edition of Word for the Family.
We hope you enjoyed those two segments, and now we're going to continue our discussion with Chris Moran, preacher for the Mars Hill Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, and Luke Stevenson, who works with the children and their families at the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama. What are some Bible principles that provide for good communication? I mean, the Bible is our guide, it's our stay, and surely within the Bible, God has provided wisdom and knowledge that if we'll just follow it, we can learn to be more effective in our communication.
Well, James 1:19 says, "Let every man be swift to hear, slow to hear, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath." And I think the breakdown of communication, we violate these three commands.
How so? How do we violate that and make our speech ineffective? What's one way?
Well, what we said earlier is I think we react rather than respond. I know two great men in my life who, when you talk to them, they pause before they give a response because they truly want to think about what they say before it comes out of their mouth.
But that's not typical, is it?
No, that's not typical. What we tend to do as humans is we're forming a response in our mind before the other person gets through talking. And what he was talking about in James 1:19, if we want to display the righteousness of God in our life, then we have to be slow to speak, swift to hear, and slow to wrath. A lot of times when folks get mad during a conversation, it's because they, number one, they don't have the facts, they don't have all the details, and they jump to conclusions before they know the whole story. A husband and wife situation or a child and parent situation, if we would only take the time to sit down and listen and talk things out, we would be much better off. You think about the way God has communicated with us. The Bible was written thousands of years ago, but God has made it relevant to our time. He has made it relevant to our age. If we would only take the time to sit down and to listen to what He has to say through the Word in our hearts, then we would live much, much better lives.
Well, certainly the passage in James that Luke brought out just a moment ago is one that we all need to take to heart and think about as it relates to our own communication. What's another Bible principle or passage that we can use to help us in our communication?
Well, I love Colossians chapter 3, when Paul talks about being raised with Christ and being this new person in Christ. One of the things that he mentions in Colossians 3 is we put off lies. We don't lie to one another. I think a lot of people have a tendency of lying to make themselves look better. Maybe they exaggerate about a story or a certain point. Well, when we become this new man, we are all on an even level playing field. No one should want to be better than another. No one should want to have more than the other. And when we talk about communication, we all know people who have up one story. You can tell a story about an experience you have, and someone's always got one to top it. You know, don't just be truthful with people, and that's a very biblical principle. And in being truthful, we speak that truth in love. Ephesians 4. We don't hate one another. We shouldn't hate one another. When we have this wrath, this malice, this anger towards one another, even if we are speaking the truth, it's not going to come out in a loving manner.
Do you think that pride sometimes can enter into the way in which we communicate with our spouse? Maybe we're proud or arrogant. We don't want to admit we made a mistake. You see where we're going with this?
I am the alpha male.
Okay, all right.
I'm not.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not.
But do you think that pride sometimes affects the way that husbands and wives communicate?
I do.
All right. What are some other principles that come to mind?
Well, in our response, we respond in a loving manner.
Okay. The way we respond.
The way we respond. I read a statistic at one point that says body language is about 50% of your communication style. I think maybe so much as what you say, so much as how you say it, and 50% was the way that you present that communication.
Yeah.
If you fold your arms and pucker your lips and bend your eyebrows down and tell somebody you love them, well, that's not going to be communicating love.
And Chris, that's so important because we need to understand that the way we communicate is not just with our words.
Not just words.
We communicate with our tone of voice. We communicate with our facial expressions, with our animation, with our hands. And so, we need to be mindful of that. We can say, well, honey, I told you that I loved you. Well, how did you say it when you did say it? It may not come across in that way. Chris?
I read another journal that indicated that when you're disciplining your children, they hear the first 12 words and then they tune you out. But when you communicate that discipline in a more loving, I care for you and look out for your future kind of way, they tend to listen a little longer and a little deeper to what you're saying.
Well, speaking of children, how can we communicate with our children in such a way as to build their communication skills? What are some things that we can do to help our children?
I think it all comes back to the example that you said.
Okay,
If you are communicating effectively with your spouse or with your children, then they will see that. It's hard to verbally say, you need to communicate better. It's hard to just, say that and it come across, but it's something you have to show. And once you show that, then your children will follow that example.
And the way in which we communicate with our children will greatly impact how they will communicate with us and how they'll communicate with others as well. Well, our time has quickly gotten by again. I want to thank both of you for being with us to talk about this subject. Maybe we could have you back on another occasion to continue our discussion. But thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
And appreciate y'all taking time out of your day to be with us.
Yes.
Communication is one of the most important aspects of our relationship with others. And learning to communicate effectively is perhaps one of the most valuable skills that can help to strengthen our family ties. Fabric of Family is brought to you each week by the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, and in cooperation with Gospel Broadcasting Network and Sane Video Productions. But there are also a number of individuals and congregations that have helped to make this broadcast possible. And so we invite you to visit with one of our sponsoring congregations or with a Church of Christ in your own home area, because the family matters, and that includes our church family too. We hope you'll join us next time as we explore another family topic from a biblical perspective that is designed to strengthen our families. So until next time, I'm Barry Gilreath Jr., your host, wishing you God's blessings and providential care until we meet again. Have a great week.